Welcome to the Atlanta Men's Workshop speaker and workshop recordings. Atlanta Men's Workshop is held every spring and fall at the Rock Eagle 4-H campus in Eatonton, Georgia. That's just about an hour east of Atlanta, Georgia. Please visit our website at atlantamensworkshop.com or see the link below to find dates and details to join us. Partial scholarships are available to those in need. We hope you enjoy this presentation, and we hope you will come join us at the Rock. Until then, we shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then.
Y'all ready to start? Have you had a good time so far? Man, I'll tell you what, my batteries are getting recharged, and I'm grateful for that. My name's Neal Story. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic.
Hey, Neal.
My home group is the High Noon Group in Athens, Georgia. My sobriety date, or let me put it this way, I haven't found it necessary to take a drink since the 21st of May, 1987. Now, I heard somebody say Father Martin told this joke, so it's pretty good, but somebody came into a meeting and he introduced himself and he said, "My name's David and I haven't found it necessary to take a drink in the last 6 years." And somebody spoke up and said, "David, you're a liar. I saw you drunker than a dog last night." He said, "That's right, but it wasn't necessary." And that's what we're here tonight. That's what I love, is the laughter we get from Alcoholics Anonymous. And I wanted to share something with y'all. And this is kind of long, but we're talking about sponsorship. Second to my marriage to my wife, sponsorship is the most gratifying experience that I've ever had in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, to connect with another man on a level that is just absolutely, well, it's the fourth dimension of existence. Bill said that. We rocketed into the fourth dimension of existence. And that fourth dimension is the spiritual. You know, that's what it is. And that spiritual is we get out of self and learn to give to others. And giving to others is the most important thing that we can do. Father Martin talked about that. He said we're put here for two reasons: to give and to receive love. That's it. If we're not doing that, we're wasting our time. I want to read something to you tonight that means a lot to me. In early AA history, around the Oxford movement time, now I'm going way back, guys. When Bill was at the Calvary Mission, when he was going there to try to help other alcoholics, the rector of the Calgary Mission was a gentleman by the name of the Reverend Sam Shoemaker. Bill Wilson counted Sam as one of the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous. What I want to read to you tonight, guys, is what Sam Shoemaker called his epigee, or what he thinks his life really adds up to and what's important to him and his God. I think you'll like it. I love it. It's called "I Stand by the Door." How many have heard of this? Good stuff, isn't it? I stand by the door. I neither go too far in nor stay too far out. The door is the most important door in the world. It is the door through which men walk when they find God. There's no use my going way inside and staying there while so many are still outside, and they, as much as I, crave to know where the door is. And all that so many ever find is only the wall where the door ought to be. They creep along the wall like blind men with outstretched, groping hands, feeling for a door, knowing there must be a door, yet they never find it. So I stand by the door. The most tremendous thing in the world is for men to find that door, the door to God. The most important thing that any man can do is to take hold of one of those blind, groping hands and put it on the latch the latch that only clicks and opens to the man's own touch. Men die outside that door as starving beggars die on cold nights in cruel cities in the dead of winter. Die for what is within their grasp. They live on the other side of it because they have not found it. Nothing else matters compared to helping them find it and open it and walk in and find Him. So I stand by the door. Go in, great saints, go all the way in, go way down into the cavernous cellars and way up into the spacious attics. It is a vast, roomy house, this house where God is. Go into the deepest of hidden casements, of withdrawal, of silence, of sainthood. Some must inhabit those inner rooms and know the depths and heights of God and call outside to the rest of us how wonderful it is. Sometimes I take a deeper look in. Sometimes I venture in a little farther, but my place seems to be closer to the opening, so I stand by the door. There's another reason why I stand there. Some people get part of the way in and become afraid lest God and the zeal of His house devour them. For God is so very great and asks all of us, and these people feel a cosmic claustrophobia and want to get out. Let me out, they cry. And the people way inside only terrify them more. Someone must be by the door to tell them that they're all spoiled. For the old life they've seen too much. One taste of God and nothing but God will do any more. Somebody must be watching for the frightened who seek to sneak out just where they came in, to tell them how much better it is inside. The people too far in do not see how near these are to leaving, preoccupied with the wonder of it all. Somebody must watch for those who have entered the door but would like to run away. So for them too, I stand by the door. I admire the people who go all the way in, but I wish they would not forget how it was before they got in. Then they would be able to help the people who have not yet even found the door, or the people who want to run away from God again. You can go in too deeply and stay too long and forget the people outside the door. This is my favorite part. As for me, I shall take my old accustomed place near enough to God to hear Him and know that He is there, but not so far away from these men who have not heard Him. And remember, they are there too. Where? Outside the door. Thousands of them, millions of them. But more important for me, one of them, two of them, 10 of them, whose hand I am intended to put on that latch. So I stand by the door and wait for those who seek it. I'd rather be a doorkeeper, so I stand by the door. Isn't that beautiful? That's what sponsorship is to me. Standing by that door and opening that latch to introduce someone to God. There's no greater privilege on the face of this earth, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. I've gone long, I know, but I just wanted to share that with y'all because I think it's beautiful and it keeps me in mind of where I need to be. And with that, I'll turn it over to my friend Terry.
So I'm Terry and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Terry.
And thank you, Neal. I have heard that before, and it's been a long time. I also like that very much. So this little workshop's on sponsorship, and I'm going to read a little something out of Working with Others. This is actually the longest chapter in the big book, by a paragraph. And there's a reason for that, because there's a lot in here about working with others. And I'm just going to read the first paragraph. There's a lot of other good stuff in this chapter that I wished I would have read before I started sponsoring guys, because there's a lot of here on how to approach certain situations, and I just jumped right in. I got sober with a bunch of guys that were doing 12-step calls at the time. We were somebody come in a meeting and didn't want to go to the hospital, and I just jumped right in. I took a lot of hostages early on in my sobriety. Anyway, in the beginning, this has to do with what Neal read, but it goes as practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry the message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they're very ill. And that's just the opening of our workshop. I think it's one of the first things I learned was to help others, because I couldn't help myself when I got here. And I did. I jumped right into the guy that just had a day and I had 3 days, and I would introduce myself a little bit. Of course, I took it a little further and said, man, you really need to be here. and that's kind of what I'm going to touch on is a lot of the things that I did were not successful. But what I did do is I jumped in there and got my feet wet, because I didn't really become a proficient sponsor until I messed up a lot. And that's when I think this workshop should be. There's a lot of you out there that may not have even sponsored somebody yet, may not have even, maybe you're just, willing to help somebody and you don't know, you don't even want to be a sponsor yet, because it's kind of fearful, it's scary. And I get that. I didn't know what I was doing, but I made a lot of mistakes, and I had some guidance at the same time. I just wouldn't use that guidance. I'm still, you take the alcohol away, and I still have alcoholism, I think I know what's best for somebody now. I'm going to tell them what to do, and they better do it, and if they don't, then I go crying to my sponsor. He won't listen to me. And he says, well, you dumbass, that's just how you were. And I would learn to take a little more subtle approach. I learned a lot of things by just jumping in there and being willing when somebody wanted the help. And in working with others, there's a phrase in there that says, it's not the question of helping. We all really do want to help people. Deep down, I always have. But it's how to help. I can think I'm helping somebody and I'm really hurting them. There's a thing called enabling an alcoholic. And I see that way too much. And money is just is the top enabler. Money and people will just love their kids to death, man, actually till they die. And they just don't understand why they didn't get this thing. And there are those that don't make it, but that's part of the seriousness of alcoholism and drug addiction is all of us don't find recovery. We die out there, and when somebody reaches out, it's important for me to try to help where I can help. For that I am responsible, and I take that very serious. The other part of this thing that it says in working with others is not only the question of how to help, but I'm not going to waste my time. And I learned this over time with the guy who's not ready to get sober. And I get better at being able to see that by experience, not by reading about it or hearing about it from my sponsor. I have to see it happen. I have to work with this guy till I just give up. And then he goes to one of my friends and asks him to be a sponsor, and he gets sober for 5 years. And I get hurt, because he told him the same thing I told him. He just wasn't ready. Anyway, these kind of things were lessons to me to learn that I got to stay out of the results business. You can tell an alcoholic, but you can't tell him much. I mean, that's true. If this guy's not ready, if he's not ready to get sober, and there's this guy over here that is, I'm denying this guy a chance because I'm wasting my time on this other guy. And I think that was an important lesson I learned over time too. But it was in this chapter, working with others, you know, and it talks about how to get to know somebody, just casual conversation, you know, get to know some, see if you have anything in common. You don't even have to talk about the alcoholism. You know, when I see a new guy come in a meeting and stuff, he just needs to break the ice and chat. You know, you don't need any more than to just try to feel comfortable in that meeting or wherever I meet him at, even if it's a neighbor or somebody just wants to talk. I heard you don't drink anymore, Terry, you know, and I would say, well, you're right, and it just opens the door for them to start talking a little bit. It talks about leave the spiritual angle for later, you know, unless, you know, circumstances are different. There's a lot of guys and men and women that come in and have a strong belief and have a strong faith. You know, I've gotten better over time because I never shied away from being willing to help sponsor somebody, no matter how scared I was to do that, no matter how hard I thought it would be, because now I got a life, you know, now I got a job. And I mean, it was years before I took somebody through all 12 steps. It was years. And I've had, and to qualify myself, my sobriety date is February 20th of 1990. And I've had 5 sponsors. I have 6. Thank God Robert did not say, no, Terry, all your sponsors has died, so I'm not going to sponsor you. You know, you'd be lucky to find a sponsor. But the truth is they all died sober. And that's part of life. But I'm grateful for those men, because I was told a long time ago I didn't need to be unattended for any length amount of time. And that is even true today. You know, sponsorship really is important, because another thing one of the older guys told me, he told me to get up there and chair the meeting, because when that new guy comes in, you're the first person he's going to come to, because he thinks you are in charge. He thinks you got all the answers. And the truth is, I only got 60 days, and I'm leading I'm reading out of the book how to run the meeting, but he don't know that. And, things like that I just learned over time. And I really did make a lot of mistakes. I've had a lot of guys die that just couldn't. I don't know why. I don't know why they couldn't get it. I don't know why they kept going back out. I don't know. But I always left the door open. I have always been at the door welcoming whoever wants to get sober, wants to sit down and read through the big book and work the steps as we get to working with others. And over time I learned some guys have been in and out for a long time, and they're finally ready to work the steps. I don't have to spend a lot of time with them on 1, 2, and 3. We get to writing right away, But that's just my experience over time, and talking to this guy and seeing where he's at, trying to figure out for me where I can help him the most. And sometimes that's just listening. Sometimes it's aggravating to listen. Sometimes it's my time, and it's a lot of that stuff. But it's one of the most rewarding parts of the program. One of the most things that I have that has ensured me of sobriety. I think Dr. Bob said one reason he does this is for insurance against taking that drink. And I have said no before. I've said no and regretted it. But I know that whatever I did, I didn't get somebody drunk. But I also know that whatever I did for anybody, I didn't get them sober either. At best, I'm just a channel for God's work, as I understand God, and the work for Alcoholics Anonymous, because these guys put up with me for a long time, and before I could, quit telling people what to do. I was the kind of guy that would set up a meeting for these older guys, and then somebody come in the door, first person come in and pick up a chair and move it 2 spaces over where they like to have it, and I'd jump all over his shit. I'd say, what are you doing? And they'd say, calm down, Terry, it's going to be all right. He can put that chair anywhere he wants to. So So I messed up a lot, and I just want to encourage anybody to ask questions, to try to take some inspiration from my story. As far as I messed up a lot, man. You don't ever get nothing right. I never learned from success anyway. I learned from messing it up, and I've messed up a lot in my sobriety, but I've also learned a lot too. And I just think that's really important, especially when it comes to sponsorship. Because I always got an A for effort, for being willing to help somebody, and that's all I got right now without taking up all y'all's time. Over a period of time, you can't help but get some experience in this field if you get your feet wet, and I just want to say, jump in. The water's fine. This is a workshop, so if you've got some questions, ask a question. You got some experiences. I remember I had one guy telling me how I should be sponsoring him, and it was tough, man. It was tough. So maybe you got some nice little experiences to share some of the new guys, whatever you guys want to get out of this workshop. I'm definitely privileged and honored to be up here sharing a little bit of my experience, especially with Neal here, and I'll let you say a few more things and we'll open it up.
One thing we need to do, guys, right now, if you would join me in the third step prayer. God, I offer myself to Thee to build with me and to do with me as You will. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, but that victory over them may show that I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Your will always. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to share a couple stories with you about my experience. My sponsor when I came in was a fella. He was an old Polish guy that ran a grocery store. I was 29 years old. He was about 75. And he wore those old plaid wool coats. I got sober in Michigan. And he would sit at the table and he would fart. And people didn't let that dissuade them from being at Bean's table, because the man was a walking big book. And I came in 21st of May 1987, and fellas, I don't want to be, I'm just going to share what happened to me, okay? I called AA after having a vodka bottle in one hand and a gun in the other, putting a gun to my head and saying these words, I'm tired. Pulled the hammer back, I said, God help me. Immediately, God started working. This is all about sponsorship, is leading people to a personally satisfying relationship with the God of their understanding, not mine, theirs. And so I called that number and I went down at noon and talked to a guy a little bit, and he said, come back later. About 6:30, there'll be a couple of guys here waiting to talk to you. And so I got there, and there were these two men. Here's Beans, and his sponsor was Eddie Kuzak. Beans had 37 years. Eddie C. had 17. Eddie C. was sponsoring Beans, just like Randy P. has 33 years. I got 37. Randy P.'s my sponsor. I could care less about the number of years. I'm looking for the quality of recovery. And in my book, Randy Parsons is about at the top of that. And he's been a dear friend of mine for over 30 years. But those two men were there. They put me on the front porch. By the time they were done talking to me, we'd done steps 1 and 2. I did step 1. It took me 15 years to get to step 1. You know how you get to step 1? You drink a lot of whiskey. You drink a lot of liquor. Nobody's going to talk me through step 1. I know that there's workbooks now, but I was instructed through the steps the first time from the 21st of May 1987 to the 4th of July 1987, when I was driving 400 miles to make amends to my brother, and that was the last amends I had to make, except my mother. We're talking 5 weeks. So at that point, it talks about when am I ready to sponsor somebody? Having taken these steps, you are in a position to offer what? Much practical advice. So when I get these guys through the steps, we don't take a lot of time, because you know what? More will be revealed later. I got a guy I really love, Jeff, over here. Jeff, how much time you got?
58.
How many steps have you gone through? We'll have him on 12 before long. And what's he going to be able to do? Give much practical advice. Early on in my recovery, the first guy that ever asked me to sponsor him was a dear friend of mine on the outside named Jim Bush. And Jim and I went to school together. I went out with his sister for 2 years, and we had a little agricultural import business on the side. Things were going pretty good, and then I moved away and we lost track of each other. In the meantime, I came into AA and things were going great, and I'm about 6 months sober. And I get a phone call, and it's Jim. And he says, "What are you doing?" And he came over, he had a new car, and we went for a ride, and he had a 6 of Michelob and 4 funny cigarettes rolling the tray, and he said, "Fire one up." And I said, "Bushwhack, I don't do it anymore." He said, "Well, have a beer." And I said, "Man, no, I don't do that anymore either." And the thing was, I knew where Jim was at. I knew Jim. So I talked on his level. That's very important. I talked on his level and told him what I had gone through. And so time passes, a little over 3 months, and my phone rings on a Saturday. And it's Jim. And he goes, "What are you doing?" And I'm going, "Oh, shoot," because it's AA birthday night, free cake in Michigan, And so I'm not missing that, and that's what I told him. It's AA birthday night. And he said, "Fantastic." He said, "I just got out of treatment. After the talk we had, I realized I had a problem. I just got out of treatment. I'd like for you to give me my 90-day chip and be my sponsor." We cry in AA when we're happy. And Joy saw the tears coming down, my wife, and what I says, "Bushwhack, he's coming over, he just got out of treatment." And I want to talk about the rewards of sponsorship. By the grace of God, and we walked through that 12-step portal to him together, and Jim was rock solid, and he started sponsoring guys, and we moved down here when I was 4 years sober, and so I would fly back to Michigan for business about every quarter. And so I'd see Jim, and I knew that he was doing good. He was sponsoring guys. They were having retreats up in the Upper Peninsula, and he's begging me to come, and I never did, and I should have. Well, about 3 years ago, he knew I was going to be there, and he said, "This night, you're with me. Nothing else." Okay, because I was usually really busy up there. So I went, and this is an experience I want you to have. We went, and we were at an AA clubhouse, and he had about half of that clubhouse cordoned off. And it was earlier, it wasn't during meeting times. And there were 30, 40 guys there. And he said, "There's 7 generations of sponsorship here. Look at what you started." And I said, "I didn't start it, Jim. God started it. You know that." But to see that and to know that just one little seed that I planted, God watered, and it grew to where now here's 30 guys with families that their kids don't have to worry about. Dad's not taking a drink anymore. You know what's wrong with this world today? People don't know why they're here. We know why we're here. It's to pass this thing on. My friend Jim died about 6 months ago with 36, almost 37 years sober. And I just wanted to speak about him to give just an homage. I knew they were recording, so that's what I wanted to do. So it's a wonderful experience. The key to success for me is this. And I tell every man that I sponsor, I said, if I ask you to do something, I want you to question me and ask me, where is that in the book? If somebody said, I want you to do this or that, I want you to ask me, where is that in the book? Because this book was 75% effective. You know what our success rate is now? It's in the toilet. Why? Because we've got all kinds of little ideas what we need to be doing. And just for me, if I stick to this, I've got a pretty good success rate. They don't need my 2 cents or my opinion. They need to know where it is in this book, and this is what we need to be doing. That's the way I feel about it. But my buddy Jim turned out pretty good, didn't he? And that's the wish I have for all you new guys, is to have that, man, what a feeling to walk in a room and just know that you were a little part of trying to help someone else. It's the most wonderful feeling, the best high I've ever had, and I've had them all. You know, it's wonderful to see new guys now. I didn't sponsor for quite a while. A lot of guys, I did for a long time, but I traveled too much. And I want to be available for the men that I'm sponsoring. You know, I was traveling all over the country 4.5 days a week, and if I got a newcomer, we're going to be talking more than every 4.5 days, you know. Or if they're not willing to do that, that's their choice. But that's the way that I sponsor. I want to get you through this book, have that spiritual experience, develop that personal relationship with God, and just enjoy the ride, man. It gets better and better and better. This is what's humbling too. I sponsored another guy named Ken Stickrow. He was 350 pounds, about 5'10", and he had a brother named Stick, and I nicknamed Ken the Twig. You know, here's a little twig, and he's like this. And I had 2 tickets. I was on business, and he worked in the same company I did. I took him to the NBA Finals, the Pistons and the Lakers, in 1990, 89. Ken still drank, and we're in his little car, and he said, let's drive my car, and it was an old Cavalier, and he was so fat that he broke the seat to where every time I'd give it the gas, I'm sliding back, and I'm on an interstate highway. I pull over for gas, and he goes in and gets a Slurpee and says, stop by Rexall, and Rexall is where drugstores are where they sold alcohol in Michigan. So he grabbed a pint of Kessler's, drank that on the way, and he's going, now you're an AA, aren't you? And I said, yeah. He said, does this bother you at all? I said, oh no, Twig. Every drink you take is getting you closer to me, man. You know, go ahead. And so we went to the ball game, and I went and got a Coca-Cola and bought him 3 beers. I come back with him, and he's going, why'd you do that? I said, Twig, every drink you take is going to get you closer to me. And I just want to accelerate the process.
That's right.
Ken called me, and I sponsored Ken. And this is one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced. At about 3 years is what it was. We'd moved down here, and Ken had another sponsor, but he still called me all the time, or a lot. And he said, I want to run something by you. When you got a sponsor, he's saying that, I want to run something by you, flag should go up. Okay? I said, what you got, Twig? He said, God's been good to me. He said, I want to adopt a kid. And I said, I think that's a good idea. And he said, well, not just any kid. I want a kid that nobody else wanted. Nobody wanted me when I was a drunk. I want to adopt a kid that nobody else... He adopted a 9-year-old autistic boy. I couldn't do that. See, my sponsees have grown way past the sponsor. 2 years later, I get another phone call. Hi, Twig, what now? Girl? Yeah. And he did the same thing with a little girl. You see, that's what this thing... Practice these principles in all our affairs. And that's what he was doing. And that's what I get to witness and have enjoyed so much. The growth of my sponsees is the highlight of my life. Even Lewis. You know, we have more fun now, don't we, buddy? You know, and it's all about passing this thing on. It's working together. It's having that sense of family that we crave so much. But with that, I've talked too long, I know, I apologize, but I thank y'all for listening. And we'll just open it up right now to questions, and I'd really like to hear comments from y'all.
Hey guys, my name is Joe. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey Joe.
I appreciate y'all letting me open this up, especially considering this is a workshop on sponsorship and I have never sponsored anybody. So,
Hold the mic up, buddy.
And I'm going to ask this tactfully because I'm very grateful that my own sponsor is in the room. But I guess my question in short is before we even get into how to be an effective sponsor, like how to know that you're ready to be a sponsor. And I don't want to make this purely about me and am I ready, but that is what's going through my mind. And some of the factors that I'm considering are like maybe totally irrelevant altogether, but you know, the amount of time that you have, I have like 8 months. You know, the fact that I'm still working the steps, I'm still wrapping up amends. You know, we're having conversations about it's okay to proceed with step 10, 11, and 12, like as I'm wrapping up amends, and not to like drag my feet, wait till I'm done. Like, I understand we're never going to feel like I'm ready, I got this. And I mean, if I did, that probably would be a problem, but you know, so yeah. And also outside of the program, like, you know, it's not going to keep me from sponsoring guys. I have to give back what I've found, but you know, things in a personal life, like having kids, traveling for work, like just like wondering, am I going to have enough time to like be an effective sponsor? And I think that's you know, maybe the answer is I need to make that. But yeah, I guess in a nutshell, I'm just asking like how to really know when you are ready to you know, be a sponsor for somebody else.
Thanks. Great question. Well, part of that, I think, you know, from my experience, and I hear your willingness, you know, one thing my sponsor had told me, I told you the story about chairing the meeting. The reason for that was to be up front, and if a new guy came in, that he would think I was in charge. So I was making myself available. You know, I like what Matt had shared. He says, his sponsor says, you need to be around some of those guys that really are sick for you to start helping. You know, I don't know if you remember him saying that. But what he was saying was he needed to be around some newcomers and make himself available. And I think that's an important step for anybody, is to go to some beginner meetings or some hospitals or the recovery places. Oh, I'm sorry, this will be for...
That's really
we're
good.
Yeah, we're good. So, you know, to answer that question right off the top of my head, those are some ideas that I think about, because it'll happen, you know. I just have to be out there and introduce myself and let people know that I've been sober this long, I'm working the steps, you know, here's my number, call me sometime, you know, make yourself available, and I think that'll, it'll happen. It just does. You can't stop it, you know, you really can't. Anybody else want to share on that or something else? Yeah.
Oliver,
Speaking, it's on.
Oliver, alcoholic.
Hey, Oliver.
Yeah, I started sponsoring guys like at 8 months sober. And I remember the fear kind of early on was that I could screw it up. I would screw it up, and then I got to the point where that's like, how powerful do I think I am to where I could take somebody through the 12 steps out of the big book and it wouldn't give them the result. And that's kind of the conclusion I had to come to on my own. Mm-hmm. And definitely placing yourself in a position to be useful, you know, made a big difference. But I like what you read, Terry, because it says something in there about it works when other activities fail, which is interesting that it's implying other activities may fail, right?
Right.
And I've experienced that myself, where something's going on and like you pray about it, it's like, oh, that's still bugging me, and I call somebody about it, it's still kind of bugging me. But sitting down one-on-one with someone else and taking them through the book and spending that time, in my experience, has worked when other activities have failed. Mm-hmm. So I you know, and what's interesting to me about sponsorship is there's so many different styles and varieties and approaches, which I'm grateful I didn't know about, because I just would have shopped around. I got sober at a home group that was pretty militant in their approach, which was great for me. So like, no matter who I picked, it was going to be like all the same suggestions, and we were going to go through the book page by page, starting at the title page once a week, and I was going to have to get a service position at the home group and call 3 people I didn't know. Like, so there was no shopping for me. And I hear different takes about that as far as how much or not enough, how involved to get, not involved, you know, and it's just, no advice, no lessons, just book, or I've seen people, not much book and tons of advice, right? The way I kind of see it is, I've heard it put this way, when we're new, our brains don't work. So I can borrow someone's brain that does work while I need it, and then I'll just put my problems through their brain when I need to, since theirs works and mine doesn't. And then eventually I can put more of my problems through my own brain as it begins to work. And that's what I try to be there to do, because it's not, of course, meeting and going through the book, and it's not the problems that are scary that we have when we're new. It's our solutions are scary when we're new. It's good to kind of work through that with people. And as far as even the speed of the steps, and do you read through the first 3 steps, or is it a conversation, and what does working with others say, and should I have them read the whole book before they can call me? And I've varying opinions on that. My first sponsor says that if you're asking somebody who's brand new with untreated alcoholism to read 164 pages before they call you, they're just going to lie. And I've heard other people say, do it. And you won't get many calls, but the ones you get
Right.
will probably be good calls. So I try not to get lost in the weeds with that. I just try and stick to, I cannot sponsor somebody outside of my own experience. And if I haven't done something spiritually from the book, in the steps, with a sponsor myself, for me, I view it as fraudulent for me to recommend that course of action for you, having not taken it myself. And so I just kind of leave it there, and this is the way we did it, and this is the way we're gonna do it, So anyway, that's all I got.
Oh, that's good, Albert. Good stuff.
And the book says, having had this experience yourself, what is the experience? The 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Having had this experience yourself, you place yourself in a position to give much practical advice. And to the gentleman here, I'd just like to say, God will let you know when it's time. That's the thing we have to do, is continue in prayer, do our step work, become prepared. And that first sponsee, when I sponsored Jim, I was on the phone with my sponsor saying, hey,
Right.
This is what I see in the book. Am I missing anything? That's the way it works. I don't drop my guys off after we do the 12 steps, say, you're done now, you can go sponsor. We continue that relationship to where I try to help walk through that. And if one of my guys is having a problem, a question with a sponsee, now they'll call me. It's not like we're putting you out here alone. You got a whole group of resources known as your family. And so it's going to be great. You'll do fine. And
That was a big lesson for me, is knowing or making the call and letting my sponsor know that I was sponsoring this guy. Because I didn't do that in the beginning. I just did it, and it didn't work. But anyway.
See, and I had to ask, because you talked about this. One of my things when we first come in, we're cloudy. Let me ask a question. When a newcomer, a new guy walks into your meeting, do you have a first step meeting? How many raise your hand? First step meeting. How many of you ask a couple of guys to take him aside and talk to him? First thing we need to do, guys, and this leads into sponsorship. The first thing we need to do with that new alcoholic is develop a relationship. I love the phrase, the language of the heart. That's what we have here, the language of the heart. And you really don't know how much I care until I learn about you. To where when that newcomer comes, that's what happened to me. 2 guys took me aside and they asked me, well, what do you do for a living? what do you like to do when you're not drinking? Well, at this point, I used to like to bowl, I used to like to hunt, I used to like to fish. Now I'm sitting in the basement drinking a half a gallon of vodka a day, dreaming about being Bill Dance, you know? But they asked about me, and then they said something that was magical. Would you mind if we told you about our drinking? Pressure was off of me. I'm going, by all means, maybe I can help these guys out. You know? And they talked, and this is the point I want to make, fellas. They talked on my level. They didn't walk into a meeting and have a room full of first steppers. You know, this one here sold blood, this one here slept under a bridge, this one here lost 12 wives, this one here got gangbanged in prison. And this guy's going, none of that happened to me. Maybe I need to go drink some more. See, that's the language of the heart, is getting my ego out of the way to where I'm listening and I'm going, okay, I did that. And then I can talk back to him. By the time those two guys were done, I thought they were in my basement drinking with me. They talked about hiding bottles in the rafters. They talked about taking money out of the wife's purse. You know, and that's why, and Beans asked to be my sponsor. These guys detoxed me at home. You talk about having faith in those two. They were sacred to me. Those guys are sacred because they saved my life. But they did it by learning about who I was. And I think that's very important, is take the time to really understand who you're talking to. Talk to them on their level. That, to me, is the essence of the language of the heart. Get me out of me enough to where I'm listening to you. You're more important than I am. Let my experience try to help you. Thank you.
Don.
Hey fam, my name's Don Bryan. I'm a real alcoholic.
Hey, Don.
Hey, Don.
My sobriety date is April 5th, 1995. And I didn't start sponsoring people till after I had a year, because I wanted to know the information. See, I'm a thumper, and I know that big book. And I wanted to make sure I could point or direct them to the answer that's in the book. If I don't know where to find it, then I'm stuck like Chuck on Stupid. So, you know, I've had sponsees that have committed suicide. Nothing that I did. They just didn't want to see our way of living. You know, and I have to apologize. I had to go leave to set up for another meeting at 11. But what I do, just like the book says, before, you know, I see so many people, when a new guy comes in, they tell them to go do this, do that, do this. No, I get them to tell me their story. Find out about them. You know, see if we have something in common. And then, if we decide to work together, well, I grill them. Are you willing to go to any length to get it? What are you willing to do? Have you had enough? Are you done? Are you finished? What do you want to do? Have you had enough? I have to grill them so that I know that they don't have any reservation. But then I take it through another step. You know, when I do first step with sponsees, we have certain things we have to do on the first step. We have to list out what we're powerless over. We have to list out all the ways our life has become unmanageable. And then we start at the forward from the first edition through page 164. And every time they see the word must, they have to number and underline the sentence that the word must appears. So they get that assignment and they call me and checking in. Well, how many must do you have? I have 25. Well, you're not even in the ballpark. Go back and find the rest. See, and the exercise is not for them to find the must, which is part of it is, but the purpose is to find out how willing they are. If they're not willing to go back and find the rest that they're missing, I tell them this isn't going to work. I cut them loose. What does it say in the big book? We find it a waste of time to keep chasing the man who cannot or will not work with you. Yep. Well, our agreement was you said you were willing to go to any length, and you don't want to go back and find the ones that you're missing. So what do you want to do? Because I don't know how to do this your way. And I don't want what you have. I've already had it. I've already had it. So, see, we're talking about life and death here. We're talking about life and death. So it's very serious. I'm not here to be your buddy. I'm not here to be your friend. Now that may develop, but I'm here to take you through the book, take you through the 12 and 12, and take you through the steps. And what occurs during that time is what it is. So, if I know the information, I don't have to be apprehensive about sponsoring somebody. In fact, all I had to do was show them what I did. Isn't that, you don't have to figure it out. It's already been figured out, and you've already done it. Just show them what you did. And then anything else other than that, then I'm making it my program instead of the program. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Did you want to share, didn't you? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I gotta leave.
Yeah,
I'm Eli. I'm an alcoholic.
Because we started at
Eli.
11 instead of 12.
I got invited to a meeting. I had a spiritual experience, and I've been happier ever since. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eli.
Thanks, I got it. Yeah. I'll come back to you in just a minute.
My name is Dean. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Dean.
Wanted to get your opinion on how to set the expectation when you start working with the new guy, as far as how often do you want him to call you and what the relationship's going to be like. I've worked with several people where after working out for a while, I realized that they didn't even know what a sponsor was. They were instructed to ask for a sponsor, so they got a sponsor, but they didn't really know what that meant. So how to have that conversation maybe from the beginning to set the expectation and set the tone for the relationship. Thank you.
Thank you.
It varies depending upon time, but I like to get together at least twice, 2-3 times a week. Okay. And that's ideal to me, because this is life or death. The thing with me, and this is what I was taught, is when I put that bottle down, that's my coping skill. This is how I dealt with life. Something happened, I drank. And now I don't do that anymore. So here I am now, without the spiritual experience this program offers. I'm stark raving sober, and so that's why it's imperative to get that relationship with God as soon as we possibly can. You have to go on what their time schedule is, how you can do it, but. One thing that I do, guys, and I found effective, is I don't ask them to read the first 164 pages. I ask them to read the first 103. What's after 103? To the wives, are you the wife? To the employer, are you the employer? The family afterward, we'll deal with that. The first 103 pages contain the instructions for the 12-step program of action. That's what I'm trying to do early on. Now, we get into that later. Once we have that spiritual awakening, spiritual experience and awakening, I think we have the experience first, because that motivates us to do more. But once we have that, then we get into the rest of the book. We get into the family. We get into the rest of the thing. But, get that relationship with God first before you worry about getting the wife back. My wife was gone for 4 months. Thank God. If I'd have had her there too, But what did I want? What did I do? They had the Kleenex out for the first week. I want Joy back. I want her back. I can't live without her. And this is what they did with me. They had a certain table at our clubhouse up in Stevensville, Michigan. And the two guys that qualified me said, you need to sit there. This is called the hardcore table. There were 12 people there that were older than me, looked older than dirt to a 29-year-old guy. They all had this damn book, and they didn't read the whole thing. The first half of it was war slap out. The rest of it was like crystal, because what? They're in the first half, they're in the first 103 pages, 164. But what they did, they walked me through the steps at that table. They would take a couple of newcomers, and I wish we could do that. A couple of newcomers that really wanted it. And this whole group just breathed into them. It was the most powerful thing I've ever experienced. I'll tell a joke on me and then I'll shut up. My first meeting. My name's Neal. They're reading How It Works. And the lady that was reading it was Miss Pauline, who finally, she gave me a nickname. I don't like to she called me Sweet Pea after about a month. But she's reading this and she's saying, some of us like to hold on to our old ideas, but the result was Neal until we let go absolutely. I thought, well, you dirty old woman. You don't even know me. I was a little bit anxious then, you know. But stick with the winners, guys. You know, if you're for the newcomers, stick with the winners. People that got this. And you'll know who they are. Lewis.
Wait a minute, he's got the microphone.
Hey, I'm John, and I'm an alcoholic.
John?
For me, in my experience, I got about 7 months clean. And,
Hold it closer, John.
Put your mic up, buddy.
Got about 7 months clean, and it took me a while to get a sponsor, because what I realized was like a lot of people were telling small little war stories about their sponsees and stuff. And it wasn't until I got to my home group and I got a good understanding of what sponsorship meant to them and what it means to me. And it's a sacred honor. And I kind of just wanted to remind everybody that not only is it an honor that you can sponsor somebody, but the things that they tell you are sacred, and they're trusting in you to keep that secret. And the sponsor that I have now, I trust him with everything that I tell him. And for me, I'm at the point now to where I can start sponsoring people, but I just don't feel as though I'm ready yet. So what I do is I listen to the person who comes to me about something, and I point them in the right direction from where I got the knowledge from and who I could talk to and who I trust. And from doing that, I learned that from my sponsor as well, because I have kids and my sponsor doesn't. So he always points me in the direction to a guy that has kids and somebody that he trusts. And it's helped me tremendously with my sobriety, and I feel a whole lot confident about my sobriety. But I just wanted to remind everybody that not only is it an honor, but it's a sacred honor. And you should really take it serious when somebody is telling you their deepest, darkest secrets. Because what stopped me for the longest was I didn't want to be that guy that everybody was talking about in the circle, because like eventually I started like looking at the people who they said they're sponsoring, and I would try to think like, I wonder if that was him he was talking about. And I just think that that's really important, because that's what drove me for a long time to not get a sponsor. And I would hate to do that to somebody else, and I would hate for somebody else to find out that they were somebody's war story and sponsorship. But that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you.
What was your name? John. John. I think that's a great point. One thing I do when I start building a new relationship is I make sure the guy understands that what we talk about is between us. And I will not share anything he shares with me, with his wife, with his kids, with anybody without his permission. And I think that's a very good point. Back in the day, I believe you can understand this, they would qualify, my sponsor qualified himself by saying, I'm also not a lawyer or a doctor. So be careful what you share with me, because if you've committed a criminal act and your wife takes me to court, or I'm subpoenaed, I have to tell the truth in court. So I don't have the doctor-lawyer privilege, whatever they call that.
Confidentiality.
So, yeah, confidentiality. So it's important to be careful also what you share with me. But just to reiterate, and I've done it several times with the same guy just to build up that trust a little bit, because I know I'm not going to share anything he shares with me without his permission. That's right. And that's a great point.
Lewis, right here.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Lewis. I'm alcoholic.
Hey, Lewis.
Grateful to be here. Had a lot of fun at the Rock.
Wow. Hey, buddy. Lewis, put the mic up.
Oh, you gotta.
Thank you.
Grateful to be here. Had a lot of fun here at the Rock. I was gonna suggest something that was really helpful for me. I really like Joe and Charlie and the Joe and Charlie tapes, and I think they said it best. Because I always got the I had a few hang-ups when I would, I'd ask this guy to spot this guy, and there would be all this confusion of like these assignments and these things, and guys were telling me, I've heard a lot of stuff, and I don't think any of it was malintended, but there was a lot of misleading information. And what Joe and Charlie said is, once you start to understand the big book, the doctor's opinion in the first 4 chapters in the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, are they're placed in order for us to read, and based upon the information presented, we can do 1, 2. They're just a conclusion of the mind. It's not real complicated. And when I heard it that way, I was like, oh, that makes sense. So what I do is like, Neal's obviously, I guess now he's my sponsor, but I'll hand a guy the book and I'll say, just read the 103 pages, start calling me every day. If they're not really moving, you kind of get that feeling over time, like, hey man, what are we doing here? If they're not calling, give them a warning or so. And like the book says, if they're not ready, man, just, it's somebody else. But after they've read those first 103 pages, they come back to me, they've done step 1 and 2. We're on page 60 and we're moving to the 3rd step prayer. We're going to say that prayer and I'm going to get you on the 4th step immediately. That window of time and the willingness of like me to coming in willing to work the steps, that window is extremely narrow. And I think that time in the beginning, is really, really critical. Like, that's something that I have to, we have to really get into action, and so I don't think, once I, really got into Joe and Charlie and stuff like that, and really started to go in with those guys. And if you guys have that, they got the Everything AA app, you can do your 10-step inventory on there and stuff like that. It's all free, man. You can put it on your phones. Everybody's got ear pods, and a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just rerun it over and over and over and over, at work. And I've been able to get a better understanding of, of the book and some of the process, and it's made me more useful, which is the ultimate goal. That's all.
Thank you.
Mic drop. Who's next? And then
Jamie, alcoholic.
Hey, Jamie.
Yeah, I gotta remember that I can only sponsor the way my sponsor taught me, and my sponsor, just like I do with my sponsees, the rule is you meet me once a week and we read the textbook, and that's the way I sponsor. For me, I got to remember, like I said, I'm not in the results business. I was sitting in a meeting I was probably about 5 months in, and we had just started making amends, and it comes to the end of the meeting is there anybody here willing to sponsor? And I didn't raise my hand, and my sponsor sitting next to me, and he says, why didn't you raise your hand? I said, man, I've only got 5 months. And he said, well, you worked the steps, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, you know how to take people through the steps now that you've done the steps, right? And I said, yeah. He's like, well, raise your hand. And, and if I remember that God's in charge, I was 5 months sober. Nobody wanted what I had. But, in time, when I was ready, God decided I was ready, and I got some sponsees. And I tell my sponsees, you know, after every meeting, I want you to find 3 newcomers. And I want you to get their phone number, and I want you to call those newcomers, and I want you to talk to them about their day. Not about your day, about their day. Because I want them to start thinking that this ain't about them. Because that's what my sponsor had me do. You know, a guy with 3 days can help a guy with 1 day. And you know, I have to remember too that that unwillingness to sponsor prep. I think the biggest mistake I made in sponsorship was not sponsoring, because that's where the magic of the program happened for me. When I could sit in front of another man and go, hey man, that was some pretty good shit I just said to him. Maybe I should do that.
Yeah.
That's all I got. Thanks.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
You know, teachers knew this a long time ago, that the more they teach, the more they learn what they were teaching. And I learned that in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, the more that I got to share my experience, strength, and hope with another guy, the more I had to go back through those steps and reevaluate my sobriety, as well as him having to do his little journey. And that was also a huge, big lesson for me to learn.
My name is Andrew, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, James.
I guess my question is, dealing with people with mental illness. Now, I know we all got, you know, in here, got some form of mental illness, but I'm talking about those that have been clinically diagnosed. You know, I got a sponsee who is on his medication, so he's able to receive some things. But if anyone could just elaborate on, you know, how we might approach someone who's dealing with a mental illness that has been clinically diagnosed.
Thank you. Good question.
Doesn't it refer to that and how it works? There are those too who have extreme emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. You know, and I guess that's the scale right there. Are they able to be honest? You know, and that's what it's all about. And you can tell. Somebody can be honest. And I'm glad that Bill addressed that when he wrote How It Works, because, you know, that's a big issue. A lot of us have mental problems, have depression problems. We're not doctors.
We're not. And my experience too with several situations like that. And I have to, you know, I can see if somebody's just not getting it, but that don't mean I'm gonna quit working with them. You know, I've had guys share with me they've been off their medication, back on medication, whatever it is, and I'm still going to be there for them if they're willing to read and do the work that they need to do. But I have had 2 situations. One time I made the mistake of sponsoring a woman, and I only did it because honestly in my heart I just wanted to help out, and I knew she was crazy, but she has schizophrenia is what she had. And boy, I couldn't get rid of her to save my life. And it was the worst thing I ever did. Not the worst, but it was a learning experience. I couldn't help her. The doctors barely could help her. And honestly, there was no sexual thing there. This was just me wanting to help her. She actually wanted to work the steps, and I said, what the hell, I'll try, you know? And but man, it didn't work out. It did not work out. She had problems. People were following her all the time, and it was a clinical diagnosis of schizophrenia. And there's just some people I can't help, but I can be willing to try, and I'll learn from that if anything. And if somebody, you know, if I don't ever put myself in harm or anything like that. If they really have a bad temper or stuff like that, then they need to get some outside help with that, because I'm not going to sit up there and worry about somebody fixing to hit me or something like that. I'm not going to do that either. Mm-hmm. You know, we have emotional problems, we do, and some of us do need some outside help. There's no doubt about that. And there's no problem with me saying, listen, man, I can't sponsor you. You know, there's sometimes I can't. They need to find somebody that can. And all I'm doing is getting them to move on to find the solution that they need to find. But that's my experience. It's a great question, though. Yes?
Ray, alcoholic.
Hey, Ray.
So in my sponsorship journey, only 2 sponsees I've had were both really good friends before we became sponsors. And my first sponsor was also one of my great friends. We grew up playing baseball. Unfortunately, he's out right now. But for me, I feel like I'm doing my sponsees a disservice. Well, one of them's in treatment right now, and one of them is at the Rock with me. But I feel like I do them a disservice sometimes because that line between friendship and sponsorship gets blurred. And I'm, don't want to hurt them as a friend, but I also need to act as a sponsor and tell them the things that they don't want to hear sometimes. I was just wondering if y'all had any experience or strength on that. Thanks.
Great question. Great question. Neal, I don't know if you want to share first, but I definitely have some experience with that. And I've had to have one guy, I actually suggested that he find another sponsor because we were just too close. And I mean that not that I wouldn't sit there and work the steps with him and stuff like that, but I actually knew that he needed another objective view. And I said, I'd still be your sponsor, but please, he was renting a room from me. And it got tricky. Now I'm a landlord and I'm his sponsor too, and now he's seeing how I live my life every day. It really got intimate, I guess is the word to use. And I suggested to him that he get another, because he quit talking. It's just something about it. He quit using me like a sponsor will take me through the steps, and we're in the steps, and he's asking questions about the steps and stuff, not my opinion or what I think or nothing like that. So there are times when it gets, it's, for me, I was able to say, listen, I'll still be your friend, but I think you need some more objective input than just mine. There's other ways to deal, but it is a legitimate, I couldn't say the things to him that I could when I started with that relationship. And I think that's just normal kind of stuff, especially if somebody you grow up with or somebody you already know. I think people outgrow me sometimes. Sponsees will outgrow me, and they need somebody else. They need 2 or 3 guys to help them through the step process and reading that book and going through the steps. And I know that also in step 5 it says I don't have to share this with a sponsor. I can use my spiritual advisor to share some of these things with, because I don't want to tell him about it. I see him all the time, and there's just sometimes I feel like, well, this secret needs to go to somebody that's not affected by it. And that's just something that I learned over time, and I think that's probably in the big book too. It says, sometimes we can go to somebody that we really do trust with this particular thing that I need to talk about, or somebody that has experience with that. Sure. Or there's times that I haven't had the experience that this guy needed some information about, and I would send him to my sponsor, or I would send him to somebody that I know that had kids in a divorce or something like that could share some of that experience with him.
Hey, Robert.
My name's Robert. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Robert.
And it's great being here. Thank you for leading this workshop on sponsorship. And just to review on that real quickly, almost all the time, once I had gotten sober and been sponsoring for a while, if people ask, I say yes. And the reason is there's somebody new in AA and they're desperate and they come up to me, and I may be busy with work, and a lot of sponsors, they say, will you help me? And I say no, and then they leave and go drink. And I don't want that to happen. So I have typically always said yes, except for one occasion. I volunteered at a treatment center I went through, and this was probably 10 or maybe 12 years ago. And this guy that I knew from church, I was going to church when I was drinking, and I was going to church when I was sober. I knew this guy, I knew his wife, I knew his kids. And so I'm in this treatment group, volunteering as a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's easy for him to come up and ask me to sponsor him. But I know his wife, I know his kids. I know that I am not going to be the right sponsor. There's other sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous right here in the group. And I live in Atlanta. There's, 10,000 AA members. There are plenty of other men for him to pick. And so I had to say, look, Charles, this isn't the right time, the right place. Now, friend, I'm not saying this is necessarily direct, but I do think you have to consider those kind of things. But I was going to share a couple of experiences. One, I'm really thankful that I had a guy that understood his primary purpose when I asked if he'd sponsor me. And he knew the message of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and practical experience in taking the steps. And he knew the right questions to ask. And he asked that key question, I think, was I willing to do whatever it took to gain victory over alcoholism? And I said yes. I was a people pleaser, and I thought that was the right answer. And but it was the right answer, and I was willing. And, real quickly he says, well, he gave me some things to do. One of us says, are you willing to ask God for help? And I said, well, yeah. And he says, well, I'm going to go home and thank God for staying sober, get up tomorrow and get on my knees, ask God to help me stay sober. Do you think you can do that? And I immediately hem-hawed. And he said, I thought you just told me you're willing to do anything. But he had sort of put me in a corner, and I was willing. I don't know that I started right then, but, he gave me this kind of guidance and sort of spoon-fed me at the beginning and waited until I was ready to start reading through the Big Book with him. And he took me through the steps. And, that was really how I learned to sponsor guys. But I also realized that some of the guys he was sponsoring, he might have done things a little different with me than with them because he knew we might have needed something different. But he had experience, and he knew how to do that. And I think one of the first things he did is, a couple weeks after I'd asked him, I was calling him and doing, meeting meetings and stuff like that. And he said, let's meet for lunch at the Chick-fil-A on a Saturday. And he did the very thing the Big Book talks about. And I thought he was going to ask me questions about my drinking or drug use or this or that, so he didn't know how to effectively sponsor me. Then what happened, he talked to me about his drinking, and he shared those experiences. And I realized that when he said, he drank till he got drunk and he kept on drinking, I knew this is a guy that drinks like me, because I'd get loaded, and sometimes I'd go on a day or so, and sometimes, I just leave home and be gone, and sometimes, I'd stop after a few, but I knew I was like him. And anyway, that taught me an important lesson. And so then when it got around the time to sponsoring, he asked me when we got to page 88, we'd been doing steps 10 and step 11, and when we finished that, he asked me, and I was probably between 6 and 8 months sober, he says, Robert, it's time for you to help somebody. And I said, Pat, what are you talking about? He says, it's time for you to get on your knees when you pray in the morning and ask God to help you find someone that you can help. I said, what are you asking me? He says, well, it's time for you to start sponsoring. And I went through the whole, it needs to be a year, this or that. And he said, Bill wasn't a year sober when he was out preaching to the guys in the Bowery. And when he went down to see Dr. Bob, that was, May, and he'd been sober 6 months. And when Dr. Bob sobered up on June 10th, when we celebrated A's anniversary, that was 1935, 18 days later, he was helping AA number 3. So that points to the fact that people, back then, they had a spiritual awakening. They went out and started helping people. And he convinced me to pray anyway to help somebody, and I was sponsoring people relatively soon. But it really has been a blessing. One last thing, this was back before the pandemic, so I didn't typically work at home, but they had this day, the current governor had just been elected, and there'd been a big snow problem right before he became governor, where kids on the school buses couldn't get home, and the governor had been reluctant to, shut down the schools. And so there's a threat of snow. The newly Governor Kemp in January said, we're shutting down the state offices where I worked, we're shutting down the schools, and it's a bright sunny day. So we were staying home, but there was no problem with snow, and this coworker called me up. And this was a guy that we had a mutual friend, a friend of mine that knew me well, knew that I was in AA, sober a long time. And she had told me that, she thought she might have had a problem, went to some meetings, realized she could stop and start. And, I told her about my alcoholism just to let her know. I said, but if you ever know somebody, feel free to share it with them. And this guy that I know called me up, and this guy was a guy that did, technical work, analytics with data. And he said, Robert, I've got a problem. He called me up that day that was a sunny day, and I was just at home hanging out. And I was thinking he had some work problem. And I says, well, what kind of problem you got? Is it about this report we're doing? He says, no, it's about drinking. And I went, oh, and I immediately started to ask him about his drinking. And I realized, wait a minute, that's not what the book says. So I got him to meet me at a restaurant down sort of where he lived near Midtown, near the Triangle Club, because I knew they had a noon meeting. So we went to an early lunch and went to a meeting. But it's the kind of thing where I could sit down and talk to him, just like you talked about. Mm-hmm. And when I talked about we traded stories. He went to a meeting, got a white chip, and he had 3 years of sobriety. And after, during the pandemic, he ended up moving to Texas, got another sponsor. But the things that have been said here really remind me the importance of what I was taught and the way I sponsored, and sort of filtering it through the literature we have, and then the practical experiences. And then lastly, I'd say is it's interesting, I've had the opportunity to sponsor several people that have about the amount of time that I've got. They got sober with other guidance with another sponsor. But these are great relationships because I get a chance to share my experience, but often it's like we're sponsoring one another because they've had practical experiences staying sober through the ups and downs of life, and the stories that we can trade and the experiences we've had in applying the steps in our life are really important. So sponsorship is truly the gift of Alcoholics Anonymous. It is. So thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, we're recording this, so I think they're going to wrap it up, and we can stick around if you want to and talk some more. I don't mind. I don't know about Neal.
Guys,
but is that right? We got to close this up? Okay.
Guys, I think there's one thing that we're remiss if we don't mention. This is a family disease. And I can't tell you the number of phone calls I've gotten. I know this isn't direct sponsorship, but from the wife going, my husband has a problem and our marriage is going apart. Can you help? And I got to remember, and I'll let them know. I know you're going through hell right now, and there's a solution for you, and it's called Al-Anon. And I think as we sponsor guys too, and there's having problems in their marital relationships, a lot of times, like my wife, I'll get Joy if she's an Al-Anon. Get her to talk to the wife. I think I missed the boat on that some, and I really should mention that. When I learned they got a wife, I talk to Joy and say, you might be talking to a wife pretty soon. But don't forget that they're suffering too. Thank you.
Anybody? Yes, sir. You go right ahead. We got a few more minutes.
Did he leave you my keys?
Thanks. Hey, Alan, alcoholic.
Cool,
Alan,
brother.
Sobriety date 16 December 2018, and I've been sponsored a few folks. I think the first 3 folks I sponsored, they ended up ghosting me. Just won't answer the phone, won't answer text or whatever. But I have had some success over the last couple years, and but my question is really about I got steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and get to 6 and 7. I know when I did 6 and 7 the first time, I kind of just glossed. There's very little in the big book that talks about 6 and 7.
2 paragraphs.
Yeah. So I was like 6 and 7. Do you believe? Humbly ask. Okay. And moved on. But then I found myself making bad decisions and repeating old behaviors make the same decisions and the same behaviors, you get the same results. Doesn't matter if it's alcohol, personal relationships or whatever, So I had to go back and visit that, and I got into the 12 and 12 on 6 and 7 for myself.
Yeah.
But I found, I know when you're going through it for the first time with sponsees and you're working on, just getting rid of the alcohol problem, do you find it better to not push too far past the alcohol problem into, because I use this program in all parts of my life now. You know, anything that's injurious or causing me issues. You know, whether it's nutrition or personal relationships or, you know, but it's still God. You know? I'm focused on God, and you know, and having God, you know, guide my thoughts and actions. You know, so. But I just wanted your opinion on, how much do you do on 6 and 7 initially versus going back later, you know, and level 2 or level 3, you know, step 6 and 7.
Good question.
Well, I think for me at least, 6 and 7, you know, here we've done step 5. We tell them to go home for an hour, and then ask God to do what? You know, do I have the building blocks in place? Is everything set? We're asking them to remove what? Selfishness, dishonesty, inconsideration, fear. You know, and I later on, for me, the 7 deadly sins. Okay, but if we go to pages 84 through 88, when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Where have we been selfish? Where have we been? That's where we go back. 6 and 7 is every day. See, that's the thing. It's a daily reprieve based upon my spiritual condition, and so it's something I have to chop, you know, and do it every single day. You know, they have been relieved. Have they been taken away completely? No, because Neal's ego needs to be shot down every now and then, I guess. But it's important for me to look at it daily. Very important. That's a good. I appreciate that comment.
Yeah, and the other point of that from my experience is I don't want to get stuck on 6 and 7 because it really made more sense after I went back to the steps again, after I went ahead and did my amends process and got into the step 10, you know, where I'm just repeating steps 4 through 9, really, because I'm still creating wreckage. I'm not well yet, you know, just because I've been through those steps. And I like the 12 and 12 because it does go a little bit more in depth to that. Bill wrote that, 10 years later or something like that, after he had a little more experience, you know, with 6 and 7. Probably wanted to write a little bit more in the big book, but I still don't let a new guy get stuck on that, though, because he's going to learn that this shit ain't going away. It's not it just don't go away forever. You know, it's a one day at a time program, and I just try to reinforce my experience with him that, you know, that we'll just keep moving on, do the amends process, get into 10, 11, and 12, and we'll eventually go back through the steps again, you know, because nobody's going to get rendered white as snow. You know, we're just trying to do this a day at a time and work on what's happening right now. And so, I mean, it's a great question. It is, because there's not those 2 paragraphs. I remember I went and said, oh, this is cool. I'm done. You know, I don't have to worry. But it really is an individual higher power in me step. Both of those 2 are 6 and 7. And they say the principal willingness and then humility, but it's me and God. And God takes that away when God takes that away, as I understand God and as I understand my experience. And I am not rendered white as snow. I have to deal with myself every day I wake up and go through my life. So, I mean, it's a great question.
All right, thank you.
Back here.
Anybody else?
Here we go.
In the booth, in the back, in the corner, in the dark.
Come on up here.
Come on up here. We need to see your face. Hey, Javier.
Javier, I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Javier.
I like what Alan brought to the table because it's very important, 6 and 7 in recovery. And like you mentioned it, you know, we are not well, you know, we are doing the steps. But by doing my 4th and 5th steps, I see the movie of my life over here in paper. And it hurts. When I got in, this is back in Mexico, almost 30 years ago, I saw in the wall 6 and 7, and I don't see how I could do this. How I give it to God, how I ask God to take this from me. I don't see how, but after doing my inventory and I saw my life in paper, and it hurt so much that now I was willing to ask him, please help me and remove these shortcomings. Please remove these because it hurts so much. And by doing the practice of the 10 and 11 on regular basis or daily basis, I always go back to the 6 and 7, like you say, because it hurt, but it takes that for somebody like me. Not just like go over there and please take away all these different. It's a process. It's a process. It's a process. And for me, that's the experience. Go back to 6 and 7 and ask him, because it hurts. Because I hurt the people that I say I love, that I mean, that I love, that I really do. So there's no other way for me to change but doing the 6 and 7 there. But it's no overnight matter, not at all for somebody like me. And thank you for letting me share this. But some deep in my consciousness, I've been sober for 18 years, thank God, and thank the program. And I know some people want what I have or what I have. And I share this with you because that's what we do here, share. I sponsor people in Spanish and I do in English also. But my sponsors fire me or find somebody else. Talking to other alcoholics, it's my self-esteem too, and it hurts a little bit. Honestly, but would you like to have a Mexican sponsor?
If I want to stay sober, I'll take that.
Well, as a new person, as a new alcoholic, this is probably a little different perception, and I get it. Now, last night I was talking to an alcoholic friend of mine for many years, and he said, I want to ask you a question real quick, and I don't want to hear shit, that's just yes or no. How many sponsors you have right now? None. Oh, good job. You're going to call your sponsor from the bar, drinking a glass of milk with an ounce of... And I say, no, but look, no. I love this guy. He's my friend. He's an old timer. I love him to death. And he make a point. I'm always available for anybody in English and Spanish. I do take them to the steps, but I find out this past year and this year I've been coming for many years in Florida too. Yep. But people rather talk with me or talk to somebody else in English, and I get it. It's difficult for me talk or whatever, or read from the book, but one of the things this man told me, doesn't matter if they fire you. If somebody needs to go out 40 times, and you are the 28th try, right. You are part of the recovery for this man. And it changed my point of view. It's good. But yeah, it's a little hard, When I went to the English speaking meeting, I was afraid to ask somebody like you to be my sponsor because the language. Right. So I'm here, I'm available, but that's my experience, and in case one day you find somebody like me that don't look like you, but ask for help, you may understand the complications about it. Thank God, by the grace of God, my sponsor, he don't talk Spanish at all, but I have a big book in Spanish and in English, and I follow him in English to make sure I get it in Spanish here. I don't take the credit for that. It was that, or like the book say, we accept the spiritual help or else. And it was the only two things left for me out there. So I don't mean to talk too much or too long, but
you're good.
That's something that's happening to me almost 20 years after I got sober. I still, I get some. I'm there, and people ask me, but they are like, yeah, I'm gonna find somebody else or other. I'm fine. It's fine. But yeah, it kind of I got an ego too. It hurts a little bit, and I don't know what else to do. But yeah, sometimes I try to talk to people, and they kind of like, yeah, I feel it. It's me. It's something about me, but it is something that I want to talk about today.
Cool.
And appreciate this platform, this mic, to let me talk about it.
Javier, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Javier.
That's so important. And from my experience, when I moved to Georgia, the hardest thing I did in my recovery was leave my first home group. I mean, those people they saved my life. And I got down here, and I'm calling my sponsor. This is back when phone bills were phone bills. My wife's looking at a $280 phone bill, going, "This has got to quit." And I was going to meetings, talking about differences. And I went to a meeting in Beaufort, Georgia, at Beaufort Morningside, and there was a man there by the name of Cliff Locklear. Cliff's gay. But you know what? And I sense it from you, Javier, and I'm not trying to take your inventory, I'm just reading the advertisement, okay? You're comfortable in your own skin. That's what Cliff was. He was comfortable in his own skin. That's what I needed. And Cliff was my sponsor for a good long while. And one of the rewards of sponsorship is the relationship. I had the privilege of going to Italy. My wife and I traveled a lot, and I'd been to Europe quite a few times, and Cliff needed a tour guide. So here's me and Joy and Cliff and his partner. We're at Assisi, Italy. His partner called it Assisi, Italy. And I had Glenn, yep. And I had the privilege of kneeling at the tomb of St. Francis and saying that prayer of St. Francis with my sponsor on Thanksgiving Day, 1999. And I just say that to say this, that alcohol is no respecter of persons. And you know what? I'm going to take help wherever I can get it, brother. And if I were around you and I needed a sponsor, I'd ask you.
Same here.
And God is, I just find this, guys, I really, really believe, as long as we're staying in fit spiritual condition and doing the deal, God is preparing us for the next adventure in our life. And sometimes I like to say we're on the anvil, where I'm that piece of molten steel and he's just beating the daylights out of me. But at the end of that, he's prepared me for the next part of my life, the next adventure in my life. And I look back and I go, you know what? If I hadn't gone through that, I never would have been prepared for this. And that, I think, that's true of all of us. He's always getting us ready for the next adventure as long as we're seeking him. So with that, thank you.
Let's wrap it up. Y'all,
guys, thank you so much for your help, for sharing.
We're going to circle up and pray our way out of here. You can turn that microphone off.
No, can it?